Charlie Lyons, how are you?
Doing well. Thank you. Thanks for having me here.
Thank you for coming. I really appreciate it. You and I got connected through the Cattlemen Association, or just Cattle Association. I don't know if you say cattlemen. Anyway, it doesn't matter. This is a very, we lined this up before all of California lit on fire, but there is an aspect of symbiotic relationship and support that cattle operations and grazing operations offer the state that I was wholly unaware of until a couple months ago. But in essence, what cattle operations do is multiple things, but they reproduce the grazing and fuel management process that, bison offered the northern United States or North America for a millennium, right? And we are reproducing that in a controlled manner. And specifically when you're talking about large, societies and civilized developments that are adjacent to large open areas, you have to have concerted efforts to manage that fuel and manage that land, lest you get gigantic wildfires that spread over into the, obviously developed areas. You founded the first Rangeland Fire Protection Association in the state of Idaho and have been kind of at the forefront of organizing cattle operations and cattlemen to participate in collaboration with the state and Bureau of Land Management to be on the scene and manage wildfires. Talk to me about this.
Okay. Yeah. I wouldn't use the word I. I just used the word I can give you a perspective of my thought process and kind of how I saw my small participation in starting RFPAs in Idaho. But there was also a lot of other things going on at the same time. There was legislative work. There was from Burt Brackett and at the time Governor Butch Otter was doing their thing. Ranchers on the ground and local BLM participants were kind of doing their segment of it. There was lawsuits and different things going on. So I can give you a perspective of my small world.
Okay. Talk to me about this. Start at the beginning, right?
Okay.
Before we had Rangeland Fire Protection, is agencies or associations? Agencies? Individual agencies?
No, there'd be associations.
Associations,
So,
okay.
Yeah, RFPA, which
Okay.
stands for Rangeland Fire Protection Association.
Okay, great. Talk to me about what was going on and how we were managing all this stuff before you were one of the people that started the first one. How, in the absence of these, what was happening?
Okay. Originally at the start, our permits are tied to public lands, and fire's always been a part of Idaho. It's part of the landscape. It's from a rancher's perspective, we harvest grass to turn into energy and food, right? So it's a critical component of our livelihood. So we don't very often burn it. And if we do burn it, we'd like to have it under a controlled scenario, maybe to create regrowth for the next year or remove brush but the fire cycle in Idaho had completely changed. And it kind of started in the 70s and 80s when they did a lot of land management decisions on a large scale, and that mostly dealt with BLM, Bureau of Land Management and Forest Service. They started removing a lot of numbers. There was different management sets as far as managing grass. So numbers were removed. When I say numbers, AUMs, animal units monthly. So cattle, sheep, there was a huge change from a lot of sheep AUMs to cattle AUMs in the industry at that time, late 70s into the early 80s. So we were managing the land better, but we were using less animals, and therefore we were creating a lot more fuel sources. And that started to change the fire regime in the Great Basin area, which you could consider Idaho, Nevada, Oregon.
May I ask a question? Excuse me. The transition from sheep to cattle, that at least had some degree of correlation in time with like the dwindling sheep and mutton and wool market in general, right? Like it was my understanding that post World War II, after all the vets came home and they're like, hey, I had to eat like canned mutton for months to survive. Like I'm never having that again. And then you had this decrease in mutton and lamb consumption, slowly kind of percolating because again, as generations grew up, the younger people weren't being exposed to it. And then you also had the creation of different fiber sets, like synthetic fibers and things of that nature. So wool fell out of favor to some degree. So you had these two byproducts of this big industry: one's food, one's textiles, obviously, and those started dwindling away after World War II. And so through the 70s and then, you're saying 80s, the lamb market, or excuse me, the sheep and wool market in Idaho was contracting, and those people had skill sets of ranching. And they're like, well, why don't we just switch animals, right? Like, everybody likes beef, everybody likes leather. We're good with that. Let's go after that. And, ditch the sheep. Am I correct in saying that's kind of what was happening in that time frame?
Yeah, it'd be fair to say that's basically what went on. And as you know, sheep and cattle are different grazers. So sheep graze at different, they're more browse, more forb oriented. You can run sheep and cattle together. And it's actually a good asset for the ground to do that. It's difficult, but so you had sheep running lots of times ahead of the cattle and eating different types of, maintaining brush cultures, maybe keeping that back. They're also, they're good harvesters of fine fuel, sheep are. And then there's just a lot more numbers in the state of Idaho. And like I said, that started to turn with FLTMA and environmental lawsuits and a lot of people looking at their public lands and through a different lens. And some of it had to do with guys in agriculture not managing a resource properly. And so a lot of science changes and good changes in some area, but we created a lot more fuel. We removed an animal that harvested brush. We created a lot more brush in behind us. And for years, that fire, you can almost consider from the 1870s on, when there was large herds in these Great Basin areas, the fire regime was almost removed from over millions of acres of land. It wasn't, and that's where you see your juniper encroachment problem. And I don't think you had this sea of sagebrush that people talk about. I don't believe you had that. I don't see it in the journals, guys that came before us and stuff. So that I believe grazing maybe created a brush environment, and then things were over on top of it, waiting for a large landscape change, and that was invasives. And so lots of times when we release pressure from the land as far as harvesting all the fuels and other things, see an opportunity to come in too. And so,
gotcha.
Anyway, the basic principle is the fire regime started to change in the 70s. We started burning large landscapes of land that we weren't able to actually even light before. This desert outside of Boise, people tried to burn it for quite a few years because it was real brush dominant and weren't able to get a fire to carry. So the increased fuels, all of a sudden fires are starting to carry. And what was coming in behind these fires were invasives, cheatgrass, Medusa head, was kind of filling in the interspace in between the perennials that were left. And those are very flashy fuels that carry fire. So,
and if I may ask, do they carry a different nutrition value? Because it was my understanding that cheatgrass is not as nutrient dense as some of the other potential grasses.
We can get out in the weeds on that a little bit, but now Medusa head is a extremely difficult annual to manage. It has a lot of silica in it. It greens up in June. It's not palatable to a lot of species, but it kind of grows in clay, more clay versus the loam areas with cheatgrass. Cheatgrass is actually a very manageable fuel, I feel, from a livestock standpoint.
Gotcha.
And it's actually in the fall. A lot of people mentioned it, graze it when it's green in the spring, but our cattle in our particular ranch, they almost harvest everything but cheatgrass. But in the fall, they harvest the cheatgrass. And cheatgrass packs protein-wise more than a perennial plant. And perennial, when I say perennial, usually it's a native species, but there are also introduced, such as other types of species that they've introduced.
Sure.
That are perennials, but mostly like your squirrel tail, your blue bunch, things like that. They actually pack less protein in the fall than cheatgrass. Cheatgrass is around 9%. It's actually a very palatable good winter range fuel.
Well, for them, not
For
for me.
cows.
Yeah, I was going to say,
But it does
I'll
pack
take the
fire.
ribeye. Okay.
And it's an interspace thing, and it needs a litter. It needs when I say interspace, lots of your native bunch grasses or your introduced bunch grasses create kind of a bare space structure around them. Invasives, anything from mustards to Medusa head and cheatgrass, they kind of take that interspace.
Gotcha. So we change the profile of the landscape, and we start having big swaths with a lot of fuel.
Correct. And fires moving more rapidly. And so ranchers have always had an interest in that. And for quite a few years, we were alongside, or the relationship was okay between the BLM, and everybody kind of got out there together, did their thing. We understood the basics of it because a lot of us grew up with fire. Most of it was planned fire. We burnt in the fall.
Sure.
So most kids growing up in a ranching community had some fire experience. And then it was in this area, of course, you grew up with fighting fire, and it's from little bitty guys. I mean, Henry was on his first fire, my son. He's 25 now, but he was on his first fire when he was 12, and that's a little bit frowned upon. But I mean, so that's what I mean, that everybody participated in these fire events. So
when I was 6, I actually put a fire out with my bare foot.
Yeah.
Now, unfortunately,
this seems unwise. I don't know if that's safety.
I had lit my carpet on fire, so it was wise from my standpoint, because I found like a lighter, and I was in my room. I wasn't even 6. I was like 4 or 5, and I was lighting pictures on fire because I thought it was cool. Don't play with fire.
Yeah.
And then one got out of control. I couldn't wave it out, and I threw it on the ground, and my carpet lit on fire, and I had to like stomp it out. And then I hid in my closet for like, God. That's how intelligent this guy is.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah. So it's same thing. Yeah. Yeah. Ranch kids start fires too. Yeah. Everybody starts fires.
Yeah.
When they're pups,
Yeah.
So, but what happened? Probably the major turning point was the Point Fire out of Kuna, and that was July 28th, 1995. And 2 Kuna firefighters were killed on that fire, and their names were Bill Butteridge and Josh Oliver. And I'll go into it if you would like me to a little bit, because it kind of explains how the relationship and the lawsuit changed whether BLM could have just anybody showing up on these fires or not.
Please do.
Okay.
Yes.
So the fire, it was kind of, BLM did their things, ranchers. So let's say you have an incident, a fire, and people show up. Well, everybody's kind of doing their own thing. There's a little bit of communication. BLM has their frequencies. CUNA, the rural fire departments, show up and they have their frequencies. And there's a little bit of communication, but not a lot. Everybody's just kind of doing their. Well, this created an incident where these 2 men left the black, which is a safety concern, drove out into fuels, broke down. Trucks shut off. A red flag warning that the BLM knew about was broadcasted over the radios, but there's discrepancy where the CUNA got that information or not. But so the fire and a red flag warning, that's usually high winds, high fire frequencies, or these thunderstorms that we get across were very, very common. They come across the Waihees, they dump rain in the Waihees, they come across with dry lightning through the Snake River Basin. Very, very common. With a thunderhead, you'll get winds, it's pulling, it's building, so it sucks in, and then when it goes by, then it collapses and pushes out. Well, that's what it did. It pushed out. The fire jumped the fire line, caught these 2 guys out in the brush, killed them. And due to so there was litigation within the CUNA Fire Department. The family members sued. And it went in front of Judge Windmill, and the stipulation that came down from that was the direction from Windmill said that the BLM could not allow on fires anymore people that weren't qualified, correct communication, followed ICS, which is Incident Command System. It's a way of building leadership within a fire or any emergency type situation. The adequate training, PPEs, and there was an age limit of 18 years old or older. So that held the BLM liable, and that included IC, which is an incident commander under the ICS structure, the guys in charge of these fires. They could be held, and that, when I say they can be held, that had to do with some other litigation I won't get into. But now the men on the fires, their jobs, their families, their house, they can be held liable if they allowed me to participate in a fire as a rancher. Something happened. The men that are in charge of these fires can be held liable. It's completely changed the dynamics of, all right, I'll tolerate you out there. What do? What you do. I'll do what I do. So that's the legality changed.
And so then they essentially owned the problem. They're like, it's our problem. If we let somebody else come on and try to solve the problem with us, then we're liable for it. Like the ownership of the management and response became their thing.
It became a legal thing for them, right?
Yeah.
It became where before they could allow me, do my thing. But now it affected these men and women and the agency itself, the BLM, legally could be held liable now. So they said no more, unless these people are able to meet the standards. And so they developed, with rural fire departments, CUNA, Mountain Home, Oasis, what have you, they started developing an intercommunication, a way of approaching fires, tried to become a lot more cohesive on these fires. Everybody was on the same channels, this is how we're going to fight, these are the safety protocols, the LSCHS, or whatever. I throw acronyms out there.
All good.
I apologize. But they're essentially firefighting language. We're on the same language. We're on the same page. Yeah. Well, ranchers being ranchers were not part of that, for one. They didn't have the legality. They didn't have the structure to become a firefighting entity, to come under a memorandum of understanding, to develop with the BLM to meet all the legal challenges.
Right.
But we were still going because we were personally invested in these landscapes. With a fire on your place, it's kind of an automatic 2-year rest, and it's devastating, to lose your fuel, to be forced off your public lands for 2 years. I mean, and a lot of more things came with a fire. A fire was extremely destructive to the ranching cycle, and plus we'd always been there. And then there was a lot of distrust. And I'll go into a story to kind of develop my distrust. When I came to Idaho in 92, and I worked out of Bruno and the Jacks Creek and the Waihe Mountains country, I wasn't real familiar with fire. A lot of fire hadn't been in that country in years and years and years. And I really didn't get into it until I moved and came on to my uncle Steve Percy's place, that I started dealing with fire. And in 2000, the entire ranch got burned over. We lost our haste. The only thing we saved out of our lower country, lost all our winter range. I go back. The only thing we saved are our houses. And that was, and I don't want to say we, when I say we, the Forest Service came in. They had a pumper on one side of the house. My uncle had a pumper on the other side of the house. Rural Fire Department came in. There was a helicopter from BLM flying. And they were all maintaining structure protection at that time. But it was 30, 40 mile an hour winds. It was a hot August day, August 9th of 2000. So we had 30, 40 miles, the fires jumping, an easy half mile out in front of it lots of times, just rolling. But where the distrust came from is that when the fire started, a couple local ranchers, Ireland's, went out there with a backhoe. They overheated the backhoe. It was in pasture 3. BLM showed up with 2 dozers, would not release them because the Oregon Trail goes through there, so they didn't release it. They said, we'll catch it at the Highway 20, which, well, for the love of God, we're between Highway 20 and the fire, right? So there was a lot of, I kind of learned from then the BLM wasn't on my side. You know, they didn't see me as they saw me as an expandable resource, right? Rangelands to them, you know, they were more worried about a historical ditch running out through that desert than they were about protecting the resources. And for us, it set us back, you know, it set us back 5 or 6 years just in income. And it was a couple years before we could turn out. It cut our numbers. They did, you know, and at the same time, you know, I felt they were at fault for not releasing these dozers and catching this fire before it became a catastrophic event. And so that distrust was built up. And it took a while, and I did ignorant things in between that, just because, you know, you some bitches, you're not going to show. I'm gonna be the guy that's, you know, I'm going to protect my ranch because I know you don't give a damn about it. And there was a lot of other ranches in that area that had the same feelings. But, you know, looking back at it, you know, like a lot of things in your life, you learn, you grow, you change, you know. I am embarrassed about some of the things and I was not an asset, even though I thought I was. I had a little bit of fire experience. We had a dozer, we had water trucks, but we were not an asset. And looking back, you know, the men on the BLM and the men and the women on the BLM were just like, they were just guys coming at it. But I was lying to myself by saying they didn't care. A lot of them were men and women that came from rural backgrounds or agricultural backgrounds. They're ranchers' kids. And they took pride in what they did, you know. So here I am out in my world saying piss on you. And they're in their world saying, piss on, you know, you don't respect me. You don't respect, you know. Yeah. So we're building, right? We're building to a wreck, essentially. So you have these lawsuits, you have legalities, you have people participating on the fires that don't respect each other, not on the same page at all, you know. I would do stupid shit like when they left, you know, I would sneak back out there at midnight and fight fire, you know, or when I'd see them coming on the motorcycles to run us off, or the lights of the cop car, you know, play games. It was contentious. It was destructive. And then, anyway, we had a fire called the Blair Reservoir Fire. And I get emotional. I apologize, but there's nothing like getting slapped upside the head, right? It changes your, and the reason I'm getting emotional is because the men and women I work with BLM now, tremendous respect for, absolute awe. So I hope you understand the emotion is just awe. So we had a Blair Reservoir Fire, same deal. So we're building to this peak, right? And we were on the fire, and we kind of developed a little bit of a truce. All right, you know, because we're even though we're angry with each other, we're still talking to the local firefighter, and they're kind of telling us, all right, when there's a fire, show your asses up, do whatever, but when we show up, please leave. Okay. So that was kind of the truth. So we had the Blair Reservoir Fire, and we did that. We showed up. We almost had this sumbitch hooked, and they called on the radios and said it was just 20, 40 acre fire. We had it hooked with a dozer and a pumper. They said, hey guys, I think we got this. Everybody's, you know, people from Boise are showing up. You know, you get fire extinct, our investigators, you get all the hats out of Boise showing up. You know, can you guys take off and give us a clean slate? They said, sure. We left. Well, that fire, another 50,000 acres you know, and it burnt a bunch of winter range, it burnt out a couple of local ranchers, it burnt, you know. So of course we blamed the BLM, right? What a bunch of dumbasses. We had it, you know. So we had a meeting at a local rancher's house, and very contentious man. Taught me a lot, but man, that guy, if you wanted to blow up a room, that was the perfect man to blow up a room. So we had it there, and that was, we should have came to blows during that meeting. The only thing that kept us is because BLM, the men there had some dignity. Because they're under, right? You and I can take a swing, but when you're a BLM or an agency person, you go to swinging on the public, right? But we really crowded them guys, and they should have swung. I mean, it should have been an all-out brawl. The things we said, the things they wanted to say. But leaving there, my uncle and I looked at each other and said, that was a shit show. That is not going to work. We are not, we can't function as a ranch and be productive under where we're heading. Because we were facing jail time. They sent a letter out a week later, the area manager and the FMO sent out a letter saying that if we didn't cease and desist, we'd lose our permits, which is under CFR 4104, which is a stipulation if you do these things on a federal lands, like it was made for you couldn't go out there and plow and plant crops. That's what the original intent was, but they were using it that we couldn't bring our dozers or our discs, you know, on these fires. And that kind of woke us up. So we sent it back another FU letter, you know, back, right? But thank God my Uncle Steve and my Aunt Helen are solution people. I'm more of a die on my sword. I was ready to put me in jail, you know, let's go. You know. But they brought the area manager, they brought the range con in. They tried to have some discussions, you know, how can you get us out there? And they said, well, there is no way to get you as a rancher out on these lands. There's just no way. You guys are just going to have to figure out how to change your attitude. We got this. But that was unacceptable to me. No. Because the trust issues were still really strong after the 2000 fire. And then we got, Steve met with a couple local guys, Todd Floyd and Steve Carrigan, two local firefighters, awesome at their job. And just the right people for the moment. Steve Carrigan, excellent firefighter, but a man that understood how to put things together, understood the inner workings, the red tape, the procedures, the legalities. He could box those things in. Todd Floyd, he's a softball coach, right? Enthusiastic guy. We can do this. We can, you know, we love you guys. All this, you know, just the guy that kind of gets you fired up, makes you feel special. And think, yeah, we can do this. Two excellent men for that. And then Steve and Helen. So they were looking for ways. So they were looking. And then I guess I come into the picture a little bit here because I went, at the time I was in leadership with ICA, Idaho Cattle Association. And I went to the 71 organization. There was a guy there by the name of Craig Glazier. And he was from up north. And there they have forest protective associations. A little bit different concept, but forest lands. And he had come down. He had heard about the problems and stuff, and had an idea for rangeland fire protection associations, which he had picked up out of Oregon. Anyway, I hear this guy, and I was like, damn, this is a way for us maybe to become legal. I didn't understand all the complexities of it, But I brought home the brochure. I brought home the idea from the 71 organization and Craig Glazier, handed it to my Uncle Steve. And like a lot of things I did, I immediately went off and did other things. You know, for me, a very small world, you know, the immediate problem is what I deal with first. But fortunately, my Uncle Steve followed through on this, him and Helen, and got a hold of Craig Glazier, brought him to the ranch. Anyway, so this stuff's starting to tie together. And then Craig's also, and the legislature, and Governor Butch Otter, and Burt Brackett, and other legislatures are working on another dynamic that I'm not really familiar with, but all this is starting to tie in. There's a lot of people working on this problem, trying to figure it out. Not necessarily how do we use ranchers as an asset. I think that came around. It was more to how are we going to deal with this problem? How are we going to put ranchers over here, and how are we going to create harmony versus how are we going to put these guys together? I wanted to put us together. I wanted to be an active participant in fire, but at the start, that was not the intent. And there was a lot of no people, and as you well know, no is a powerful word, right? And because it doesn't pack responsibility. Sometimes it's damn sure prudent to say no, but I have noticed that, and I've noticed it within myself, that no is an easy way out. Like, no, that can't happen. No, because nothing comes with it, right? If you say yes, then you're held responsible. You have to have thought process. You have to have input. You have to participate. You know, all of a sudden you're part of the problem or the solution. But we had the right leadership at the right time. A lot of men and women came together at the right time. Things changed. The rule of the fire department, a chief changed. The FMO within the BLM changed, the state director changed. You know, a lot of things happened drastically at that time. We've got some yes people on this scenario. So my role at that particular time was I went over to Nevada, talked to guys in Nevada that had, it's not an RFPA system, but it's similar to that. And then my uncle and I went to Oregon, where the RFPA system had originated in 1962 and then kind of blew up around 2000 when the fire regime was starting to change. So we went over there and got some ideas and some thought processes on the structure of how to put an RFPA together. And so we came back and we through the state of Idaho, which was going to have to be our legal partner. I'm probably jumping a few things, No,
I'm following 100%.
So what we found out was that we had to participate with the state. You had to be able to take a rancher. You had to partner with the state to give yourself that legal fire entity, and then a lot of doors would open for you. So they established that legislative-wise in 2013 with House Bill, I think they changed Title 38, if I remember correctly. They changed title to float, so that gave us the legal structure. The state fire marshal and stuff gave us some funding to start with PPEs, those protective fire equipment, with a stipulation that you had to be a 501c3. A nonprofit organization, you had to have bylaws, and you had to have insurance, and that's to give you legal standing as a fire entity. So we're not a rural fire department. We're not a taxing. We're just a nonprofit organization that has legal standing within the state to participate in fires. So then we also went into the training part, which is the S-130 and the S-290, which is a basic red card firefighting stance that you have to have within the agencies to participate in fire. And that all comes from the windmill litigation. So I should maybe go back to the windmill a little bit. And there was 5 stipulations. You had to be over 18 years of age. You had to have PPE, which was protective, the no-max shirt, no-max pants, hard hat, fire shelter. You had to have those things on your body to participate in fire. You had to have red card training, which is the S130 and the S290, which is the cool numbers they give firefighting training. And then you had to have communication. So when you're on these fires, you had to be able to talk to the BLM or the IC, Incident Command, on these fires. So you needed whatever kind of radio you wanted to use, whether it was a Kenwood or a Virtual or hell, I just forgot the name of our radios. Yeah. But you had to have a correct kind of radio, and King radios, excuse me. And then you had to fall under the ICS, the Incident Command system. You had to have a basic understanding of that system. And so when you showed up on a fire, who's in charge? Who's going Zulu? Who's going Alpha? How are we going to fight this fire? Basic understanding of firefighting language. So. Didn't
is
know
that
was
a train whistle? Is that a train whistle?
Yeah. Is that normal?
Well, mine's a robot, so yeah.
Am I just rambling on?
No.
Is there any flow?
Listen, I'm tracking.
Okay.
Can I tell you something that throughout this whole story, it's really such a human experience, right? And I deeply, when you're talking about feeling bad about things you did as a younger person, I feel that intensely. When you talk about feeling betrayed by government agencies that were supposed to save you, I feel that very intensely, and not being an asset, right? Like that's like my whole life.
Correct.
What value do I bring to people? But it's also, I find this narrative to be a very Idaho story, which is there is a problem that we need to solve. And for whatever reason, either it doesn't exist or it's insufficient, the powers that be that are the agency or the government, they will not be the ones to either have the creativity or the means to solve it. And it's us, the people of Idaho. We have to solve this. And I am new to this state. I'm not saying I've been here and I've seen it my whole life and my granddad did it or something like that. But I also have a deep, deep appreciation for that, which is, look, man, if somebody has to fix it, I'm as good a person as anyone else to try to fix this. And correct. That story of this state, I keep seeing it over and over and over in these different areas. And it's such a beautiful thing. It's when people talk about this being like real America, again, I was telling you before we turned on the mics, like I've been trying to figure out what this state is. Like why Idaho? Why is Idaho unique? There's a classic scene from the famous book Atlas Shrugged by Ayn Rand, where they're talking about, all of these industries and all these companies are moving. I think it was like Colorado in the book or something. It was still when Colorado was kind of the West. And there were things happening there, and people were trying to figure out like what was happening, like why there, and that book's all about capitalism. So it was like, less regulation stuff. But I think this is one of the pieces that makes Idaho, Idaho, that it's like you have a populace and you have a population that is willing to not just participate in the solution, but be the solution, find the solution.
Correct.
They understand that, yes, we believe in limited government, but we also believe in limited government because we can figure this out ourselves. Not like, oh, we don't know the answer. Let's increase the size of the government to figure it out. It's like, no, we don't know the answer, but damn it, man, that's just today, because maybe we'll know it tomorrow.
Correct.
And we're going to get after it. And it's so striking to hear this. It's like, as you're going through the story and adding details, it's like, I know what the answer is going to be. They're going to figure out that they have to figure it out. And you have. Right now we have, like over a dozen rangeland protection associations throughout the state of Idaho.
11.
Right? 11?
Yeah, but dozen.
Dozen between friends.
And that's easier to say a dozen. Yeah.
Once once you established the first one, how did this spread? Like, did you just essentially start reaching out to other members of the state? Did they start reaching out to you? Like, how did this become a statewide mechanism for the citizens and ranchers and business owners of Idaho to start protecting themselves?
I honestly don't know how that process went past Mountain Home. My participation in the Mountain Home was, to get ranchers together, come up with the bylaws, the 501c3. I was so exhausted by the time I got done talking to ranchers and trying to bring them on board and working through the little things like wearing a yellow shirt. My argument for wearing it, if I gave you $100,000, would you wear the damn shirt?
No.
Yeah. You get people, and then me, when I say people, please include me, maybe 100% in that. They get hung up on the damnedest shit. And I was exhausted. I found myself, I lied, I coerced, I bent rules, I used every social skill I had: whiskey, anger, friendliness, ass kissing. I used the parameter, and I was exhausted. So I didn't go out to other people. I was just so damn happy that maybe we had found a solution for the Mountain Home and the local ranchers and how to protect the ranch. I did not go out, and so I believe it through the state, or maybe through magazine articles, or just word of mouth among ranchers. There were some brilliant people, Micah Gary and Mike Faulkner over at Sailor Creek, 3 Creek guys that picked up on it right away and took it to places that Mountain Home didn't take it. Became very efficient, very good firefighting organizations. And so no, I don't know how it spread, to be honest with you, because like I said, I was happy to play my little part in the role and was exhausted. And had no interest in trying to convince more ranchers to be agreeable.
Yeah.
Is it?
Charlie, what a journey.
Yeah, it was a good journey, and it's not over yet. There's still ass kissing to be done. There's still game, it's still part of or being with people and thinking, anytime you try to draw people together and continue, there's a passivity in all things, when the problem's right there, everybody's on board and then the solution's kind of solved. You lay back, but there's never a time to lay back, fires there every year. It's a continual. Keep people enthused, keep them wearing their yellow shirts, keep myself enthused, keep myself not being burnout or... I just had a conversation the other day with a local rancher. We expanded our boundaries within these RFPs, and I should include that in some of the structure of what an RFPA is. It's taking kind of unprotected areas. So the RFPA, our responsibility within the RFPA is protect and firefight on private lands and state lands within this boundary. So our boundaries don't take in Forest Service unless we have an MOU with them. And they don't take in BLM unless we have an MOU. And they don't take in rural fire districts. We go out around it because they're a taxing district, but we develop MOUs with rural fire districts. So we're taking what they call it kind of unclaimed lands in a way. So there's a specific boundary that you operate in. We're not allowed to just come to the Boise foothills and fight fire. So anyway, we expanded our boundary. Maybe I don't know if I want to go down. So we expanded our boundary so that a rancher was called and said, hey, I want to be your friend. I want to participate in this RFP. What the hell is this RFPA thing? So I kind of go to explaining it, and he goes, well, I don't know if I got time for that. Bam, instant FU phase in my brain, right?
Man, instant, you're telling the story.
Year,
I want to say that to you. Got
just that year, we had fought a fire that bordered his flipping BLM. All our resources, all our time. These guys, I mean, we got some tremendous firefighters. J.T. McCallum, Neil Helmick, Chad Helmick, and John McGrew, and some guys that show up, give it all, their own personal equipment, mind you, their own personal diesel, their own. I should get into that. What is that? How RFPA equipment and structure works, but gave all their own time. And I got this flipping rancher that's got attitude, I have to be really careful in those areas because not everybody participates. Not everybody's on board. Not everybody sees value in it. You just gotta, like a lot of solutions, you gotta say, okay, Lyons, what can you do? Change yourself first. Right. And with it in the fire world, all right, Lyons, what can, you can make fuel breaks. You can have equipment on your place that can protect you. You can get the training. You can have a radio. You can communicate. You can, be an asset, right? Because a lot of people don't understand when these fires come, and you saw it just the other day in California. You saw it in Eastern Oregon this summer, or you saw it right up around Sweden. Your ass is on your own, and you have to realize that there are not enough resources. There is not enough people. There is not enough man. You cannot maintain a fire structure for the catastrophic fires that we're dealing with. You have to understand that you're on your own. So if you get that mindset, then anything that comes that helps you is like manna from heaven, right? But if you have the mindset you're on your own, then you're not shocked when you're on your own. And so the ranch kind of operates from that perspective, and then everything else is gravy, right? But to have the mindset that you don't have time to deal with fire, or you don't think about it till it's on your back doorstep with all the things that are going on in the world is mind-boggling to me. And I have no tolerance for stupidity in that area. Does that?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, you really, in these fire regimes, when you're having fire, in Pacific Palisades, I mean, what a loss to the world, to that community, to California on a whole. They say, oh, we'll rebuild. Like hell you rebuild that. You do not rebuild 500 years of history and trees and vegetation and structure and all that. Just think of all the agricultural beauty of men and women that built houses of all different kinds of structure and used different, I mean, and the possessions inside and their family houses were passed down 5-6 generations in that area. You do not replace that. Does that?
You're not replacing a baby picture.
You're not, right. So you can't put a figure on this thing. So where am I going with this? I don't know where I'm going with this, but I went off on a tangent.
No, it's in the case of California, I find it's so, again, I was born and raised there, and I'm, like you would want people to. You keep your head down, you go to work, you do the best with the hands you were dealt. And I feel that I did that. It was like, look, I did the best I could with what I had. And again, you have this, it's very difficult to express to people. Like I tell people, when you move here from California, you don't understand what conservative means, right? And okay. Frankly, it's very hard to pin down. Because in California, if somebody goes duck hunting with a shotgun, it's like, wow, that guy's conservative. That's it. That's all you know about conservative, right? You move here and it means something different, right? And you have, like actual sovereign citizen movements and you got all this stuff. And so it's hard for me moving here understanding that. But it's also impossible for me to explain to an Idahoan what life is like there. It's hard for me to explain the level of, betrayal, of confusion, of gaslighting, of just like, how is this happening? Like the astronomical sum of money that it costs to just live there just every day. I mean, friends of mine have normal houses. They're empty nesters. They pay like $600-700 a month just for water. And then you start adding up $600 for your electrical bill, $700 for water. You start throwing on property tax. You start doing these things. And mind you, your whole family lives there. You were born and raised there. I have a dear friend who married my wife and I. And his dad ran cattle all over the foothills in the East Bay in San Francisco. He grew up, helping his dad with that. And he goes back a long time there. And here he's stuck saying like, okay, I either figure out a way to pay, $4,000, $3,000 in my utility bills, my astronomical property tax, dealing with bad schools, dealing with crime, and I get to be next to the hills my dad ran cattle on, or I leave. And to have to navigate that decision is so difficult and painful. And to your point where it's like, once you've lost something, it's never coming back.
Correct.
Like if you burn down that place, like, and we're talking, somebody just moving, but you burn down a place, you never replace what that history is for people. And it's very easy to look at places like California now with disdain, especially somebody who used to live there. It's very easy for me to look at it and be like, well, you did this to yourself. I got out. Look at me.
No.
But man, you don't know what it's like to be there.
Yeah.
You don't know what it's like to be there and see your mom crying when you're leaving and shake your father-in-law's hand and look him in the eye and know you're taking his daughter to a different state that he's never been to and she's never been to. And they're all trusting you to make that move. That has got to be one of the hardest things you could ever do. And to look past the damage that's being caused, by these fires there, it's like, these are people, man. It's like, they're not the politicians. You don't have a state of 40 million politicians. You have a state of 40 million people and their families and their grandparents and their memories and the parks they grew up going to. And the state has become something that people look very disdainfully on. And I understand why. I do. But it's also people that are hurting and they don't, for whatever reason, they don't feel that they can leave yet. And that's, man, it's a hard thing to reconcile. So when you talk about Pacific Palisades, I have several friends that live there. These are not bad people. These are people I knew since I was 19 years old that are good, hardworking. I won't get into it, but they don't deserve that. They didn't do anything for that. And 99% of them are very conservative and wish the state was different. They don't deserve that. No. They just can't. I mean, one moved into her grandmother's house. There's a house that's been in her family since, like the 50s. And it's a travesty.
Correct. Yeah. I don't look at it that, never have. My aunt and uncle and my wife they're 7th generation now, Californians. They came, very typical thing that was happening down there. They had leased ground. They had a family ranch that was too small. It's a condo refuge now. But I had a lot of ground leased. I think my Uncle Steve told me he had 8 miles of subdivision bordering. And you can imagine the complex right there.
Yeah.
That ground was starting to get developed. He was losing his lease ground. They sold the house, sold cows, moved everything. Came here to Idaho, where, like a lot of people do and did. So, no, I don't look at this fire regime. I mean, it's foolish to say, well, the rich, they can read to play, or it's only a poor man's wreck, or looking at a ranch that gets burned over like ours. A man could look at that and say, well, you're worth $10 million. What are you crying about? No, this fire regime in this nation and the way our lands are managed and the system of management, probably 30 years of environmental rule, I would say, so to speak, has taken us down a path of disconnect from the landscape. And a lot of people are going to have to turn it around and spit in the eye of this devil, because it's everybody's problem. And it's breaking communities, it's breaking states, it's breaking agencies. Agencies don't have budgets anymore. They got a fire budget, and the rest of the shit is kind of looked at if possible. But the Forest Service, their major, all their time is spent either reacting to fire, trying to prevent fire, fighting fire. I mean, fire consumes them. And it consumes a lot of us. On the ranch, you know, I don't know how much time is spent on fire or the costs that have gone up because of fire. And you can look around the state, you know. And these are resources going up in smoke, millions, billions of dollars. So it's everybody's problem. And I think that's why I went off on that tangent, you know, anger at the rancher or anger at, you know, because it is a frustrating, difficult problem. And so those that aren't participating in it, I think you're next on the list, you know.
Yeah.
But this concept too, and I need to be very, very careful here, because safety and fire go hand in hand. Number one priority is life, right? Life, property, and then it goes down from there. But life is, you know, that's hard to justify when you lose people in a firefight, either firefighters or a fire situation. So life is a priority. But I've never been in the concept of run, fools, run. We got your back. I do not believe that. I don't think that's leadership. I don't think that's the way humans should react to things that are turn around, spit in the eye of the devil. Look that fire in the eye, whip it. And how do you train vast amount of people? I mean, the concept now, right, is people, you know, get everybody out, let the firemen do their job. So I'm in a very fine line here.
I get what you're saying.
But you understand the underlying message of that is you're not in control. You're not helpful. You're not a participate in saving your house. You're not get out of the way. And I don't think that's leadership. I don't think that's how we're going to take this problem on. You know, these communities, it needs to be where men and women come together and all right, we got this going on. All right, these are the structures. We got this. Save their houses, save their communities, you know. What are we going to do to address fire? How are we going to prevent these kind of catastrophic, you know, how are we going to look at landscape differently? You mentioned your friend where his dad used to graze those hills, but they're not grazed anymore. The timber's not harvested. The natural resources aren't harvested and managed. And, you know, this is old school stuff. So I'm kind of going down and thinking about now, I've fought those battles for so long, they're almost tiresome. The harvesting of natural resources and the harvesting of timber. I told you at the start, you know, I used to work in the woods as a logger. My father was a career Forest Service sales contractor, timber contracting. I almost exhausted trying to teach people how critical natural resources are. So now I'm looking at another solution. All right, how do we turn people around and fight these fires? How do we get people to protect their own livelihood? How do we teach them how to create inner space? How do we teach them about fire behavior and what to do during a fire and how to, you know, those kind of things. I don't know if I can teach them. I'm exhausted trying to teach them about harvesting fuels and harvesting timber and large landscape management and fuel breaks. And I find that exhausting anymore. I felt like we failed at that area. So now, is the solution to teach people to become firefighters? I don't know. But somehow we have to stop this this interface, urban interface mix, where we're taking out thousands of people's homes and infrastructure.
Charlie, I can tell you, I've met a lot of really incredible Idahoans since I've been here. I've talked to lots of them about a myriad of different things. And one thing is really clear to me, that we are coming to a changing of age of Idaho. And there is a collection of people that did the damnedest, did the best they could for the last 3, 4, 5 decades to keep Idaho moving forward and keep everything working. And it's time for other people to pick it up. So you talk about being exhausted. You talk about, how do we do this? Maybe that's not your job anymore to figure that out. You know, you obviously laid the groundwork for something that, for lack of a better word, took fire across the state. We have these rangeland management associations, protection associations that you were obviously an integral part of making. Maybe you don't have to worry about it. But, I mean, listen, please come back. Let's have another conversation. I want to hear more about this. I want to share stories about what you guys do and help people understand how just integral your lifestyle is to our benefit, to just an average idiot citizen like me.
Yeah.
How much we depend on it. Because again, until a few months back, until I moved here, like, I didn't know this, right? Like, I didn't have any concept of this. And people like me are not going to, unless we hear from people like you. So,
no, I appreciate that. And then I skipped over. Yeah,
there's no way we're covering everything.
Yeah, you spend most of your life with the things you should have said, could have said, or would have said.
Is there something you want to say?
I think I'll tie it. The RFPA, like how the Mountain Home RFPA is set up. It's set up individual ranchers. So we're set up that you needed to own public lands in order to be a participant in the RFPA. And that gave us a certain mindset, a like mindset about firefighting. None of us wanted to be firefighters. That's not our goal and objective. But we also brought skills and experience to firefighting. And then it was our home. It was our lands. Now, whether they're public lands, state lands, or our own private land, it was our home. It was integral. So it's a different mindset to other things. So that was important to us that we did that. And a lot of us brought our own equipment. Now, there's a world out there that's not sustainable, and that is the firefighting world, because it's only used for a short amount of time, if you can. So we wanted the equipment that we use be our own water trucks, our own dozers, our own spray rigs. Now the state was exceptionally beneficial in helping us gain some of that or updating some of that, but it's our own equipment. We use it 12 months out of the year, and then there's a fire. That's sustainable, right? It can be used, our water trucks can be used to haul for cows, or our trucks can be used to go to fires, I mean, so then you have a vested interest in that. You're not looking out for somebody, well, I need a tire, or I need the diesel, and so you become a firefighting entity that can maintain itself, because the monies blend in. It's extremely beneficial that we're there, because in a matter of an hour or two, we can lose $150,000 worth of feed just in a couple hours of winter feeds, summer feed, and so that's the benefit of us as ranchers being there. The other thing that I think is missed, and you see it a lot, and I can go into a lot of acronyms, but every time there's huge catastrophic fires, the heads get together, and there's tremendous paperwork and conferences and meetings, but the thing that they miss every frickin' time is unbelievable to me. They miss that 2, 3 entire industries out there in the nation as a firefighting source, and that's logging, that's grazing, and that's mining. They're never mentioned as a firefighting entities, right? I grew up in a world in logging where there was 3 or 4 Jippo loggers out in the woods in a particular area at any given time. And when there was a fire start, those guys showed up. Boom, right? Suppress the fire, the firefighting entity, the road infrastructure, the water infrastructure in rangelands, the amount of cattle trails. I mean, the whole infrastructure, that's all safe zones. That's all places you can catch a fire. That's all, the amount of stock tanks we have a lot of tanks that we fill with springs off the ranch that have a tremendous amount of storage, and our stock ponds. All those kind of infrastructures are just like, and that's just piddly shit. And that's what's changing so fast in Idaho and Wyoming and Montana, is there are no more people out there in these landscapes harvesting, managing, utilizing, and they're your first line of defense, right? And it's being cast aside at a rapid scale. And I think it's a huge detriment to a lot of people that the logging industry is almost gone. The mining industry is just a segment of, I don't even know if people even think about it. And the ranching industry is disappearing at a rapid rate. And those are your first line response. Those are your first lines of defense. That infrastructure is vast and critical. And it's missed out on. It's missed out on all the paper. They're not invited to the table in firefighting. That would open a lot of windows. RFPA's opened a lot of window for me to be at the table and talk about grazing and infrastructure, where before, you were just left out of the picture. So that's important. It's important that we go back.
Charlie, thank you for coming today.
Thank you.
I want to have you back. I have so many questions, but I know if I ask one,
I'll go.
I know. Listen, please come back. Please let's do this again. I know you take time out of your day. It's a working day. I know you took time out to come here. Thank you so much. I really appreciate you. Let's do it again.
Yeah. Thank you.